And I need somebody to keep track of time for me, if you would. How are we doing?
We got 30 minutes.
30 minutes, okay, good. Actually, I guess my camera will beep at me when it's done too.
I guess it says through teamwork and coaching others, which means like he didn't do it by himself.
Well, I don't know that it's bad that he didn't do it by himself. In fact, when you go into a company, most of the times you won't get anything done by yourself. You have to work with other people in your department, with purchasing, with the assembly area. My experience is primarily manufacturing, so I speak in those terms. But most of the time, you will not get things done all by yourself. You'll have to work with others. So I don't see anything wrong with teamwork. I think teamwork is a good skill to talk about. What else? Anybody notice what's missing here? Something really big. Do you see that there's no context? There's absolutely nothing to support this claim. What goals were achieved? If he said, achieved goal of doubling sales, I don't know. Increasing sales by 10% even, I don't care. If he said that, achieved goal of increased sales by 10% by coaching others or by teamwork, I would say, yeah, he probably did. I could pick up the phone and I could call his reference, which he would give me, I'm sure, if I asked him for it. As the interviewer, I could pick up the phone and call him and say, hey, did so-and-so, did student XYZ here, achieve the goal of increasing sales by 10%? Well, how did he do that? Did he help? Well, yeah. He was an employee for me. He did. It was our goal. He helped us achieve it. And the way he did it was he was a good salesperson, and he actually went above and beyond and taught the other people around him how to sell well. He would see people come in and he'd say, come over here with me and watch how I do this. And then review afterward and say, did you notice they said this? They had this problem, and yet they were resistant in this area, and I found this phone that fit their needs, solved their problem, they weren't resistant to it. This is how you do it. Yes, he did that, and that bumped up our sales by 10%. You see how that context can be verified? It doesn't have to be great context that is, unbelievable achievements. It just has to be some context. All right, let's see what else we got. Recognized by manager for tactful dealings with difficult customers while maintaining high customer satisfaction with a CSAT score of 100% satisfaction measured by customer surveys. What do you see here? What's wrong with this point?
It's a little long.
It's pretty long, right? It broke a line. That's probably a rule of thumb. Don't break the line unless you absolutely have to. Okay? So when you have a long line, most of the time the reason is because there's more than one skill you're trying to describe. What skills do you see here?
Recognized by manager for tactful dealings with difficult customers.
Good. Tactful dealings.
Maintaining high customer satisfaction.
I see two things. Dealing with difficult customers and maintaining high customer satisfaction. Now, those two things are separate. They're related but separate. Not all customers are difficult customers, right? And the 100% satisfaction score includes not only difficult customers but all customers, right? At least all that were surveyed. Whereas the difficult customers, that's a subset, and it's a different skill. In fact, there's some good words that could go with difficult customers, things like diplomacy, right? You're diplomatic in relating to these customers. They were upset. I dropped the phone, it barely hit the corner of the couch and it exploded into a million pieces. I'm upset now, right? You got to deal tactfully with that customer because you'd actually like to keep them as a customer, but you don't want to just give them a brand new phone if you can somehow avoid it, right? Maybe they didn't maybe they didn't purchase the extra protection that doesn't cover dropped phones. I don't know. Right? Maybe you sell them into the phone that has Gorilla Glass or whatever the latest thing is that's stronger and better and won't break so easily. Maybe you help them get a discount because they didn't know this discount program was running, and so you say, well, you don't really tell them, hey, we're doing this for everybody. I can get you 20% off on this. Would that help? You get a phone that's a lot stronger, 20% off. You'd be happy. Would that work? Now they're happy again, you see? So being tactful, that may or may not have been ethical, I don't know. But in any case, there's always a tactful way of dealing with people, and learning that skill is valuable. When I worked for my first job, I won't mention the company name, most of the people there were friendly. There were a couple of people you really had to know how to deal with. One guy was kind of like on or off, okay? He was either going to be really easy to deal with or really hard. And I figured out how to tell him what he needed so he would be easy to deal with. He never really got upset at me because I knew how to play the game. I figured that out. But then there were some guys in the back of the shop that did a certain job, and they were just cantankerous. It didn't matter what I did, they were going to tell me I was wrong. So you know what I did? I let them tell me I was wrong. I learned how to deal tactfully with them. I learned how to get on their good side. I eventually won them over. And that is a skill worth having. That's a skill worth talking about on your resume. Okay? All right. So this should be broken up into a couple different parts. Number one, there's strong context. The manager recognized that the student was good at dealing with difficult customers, right? That's one thing. Maybe he gave him an award. Maybe it was just a verbal commendation. I don't know. It could be written that way. So you would put the skill word out front that you're able to deal with, tactfully. So you have a diplomacy skill as recognized by the manager. That context would go later on, you see. He's put the context first for the tactful dealings with difficult customers. But then break it up into another point where your supporting evidence is the 100% satisfaction as measured by a CSAT score, whatever that is. Apparently it's something that Sprint uses, but 100% sounds really good, doesn't it? So high customer satisfaction. This is a person who can satisfy other people, that can deal with other people in a way that those people want to deal with them again. Okay? Excellent with multitasking with specific deadlines and attention to detail. Now that I've told you all of my spiel about how to write a good point or analyzing all these other points, what do you think about that point? One thing, the grammar sounds funny because it's with multitasking with specific details. It needs to be reworded, but ignoring that part. Is multitasking a skill you would like your employees to have? Probably. There's some argument as to whether multitasking is actually good or bad, but let's just pretend it's good for now. Is there any context here? No, there's no context, right? Are there multiple skills here being claimed? What are they? There are. Multitasking is one of them. What else?
Attention to detail.
Attention to detail. That's right. Attention to detail is the other skill. These should be two separate skill lines. Okay? All right, so how do you make a resume that avoids these problems, and how do you recognize what skills you have? Well, here's the method. It's pretty easy. I discovered it with my daughter. You know what happened? One day I got home and I was putting her to bed, and she was about 2 years old. And what did she say? Daddy, tell me a story. Trying to put her to bed, right? She wants to go to sleep. So she wants to hear a story. I was tired of reading about whatever books we had at the time, right? I was tired of coming up with a story. So you know what I did? I told her the story of my day. Now that's the most boring story I could think of, and it put her to sleep pretty effectively. So I highly recommend it if you get the chance. Okay, the story of your day as an engineer, okay? It's pretty good for putting kids to sleep. It almost put me to sleep. But here's what I suggest you do. I suggest you write a story about your average day in whatever job experience you have, whether it's engineering, whether it's Burger King, whatever it is. Pick one job and start off writing the story of the day. Set aside about 4 hours to do this. That's what it's going to take. Okay, I know it doesn't seem like it, but as engineers we typically don't like to write, so it takes us longer. Okay, you're going to write a story. Do not get into the bullet point trap. The bullet point trap is where you're writing bullet points. You're saying, because here's what you'll do. Bullet point, go into work. Bullet point, clean the grill. Bullet point, serve customers. Bullet point, go home. You've not recognized any skills. The more words you can get down on the page, the more richly you will describe what's going on and what you've done in your job. And the easier it will be for you to then begin to recognize what skills you have. And guess what? Then in the story you will find all of your context that goes with that skill. So you'll be able to extract a skill once you recognize it, the context, and just write it out. You'll wordsmith it until it says, accurately describes what you do and what skill you have. Now this is a story that was written by yet another student. I'm working with a student right now. He's an MET student. He's given me permission to share this with you guys. Okay, so I will read some of this. You don't have a copy of it, but I'll read some of it to you. So this is the most boring story you can write. You ready? During my 2018 summer internship with Metalsa Structural Products in Elizabethtown, Kentucky, each day began with waking up at 5 a.m. to get ready for the day. I left the house at about 5:30 a.m. to make the 1.5-hour drive to the E-Town plant. After parking the car in the general parking lot, making my way through the RFID-controlled turnstiles, and donning my safety glasses and earplugs, I walked through the production floor to the reliability engineering office. He hasn't done any work for the company yet. Do you recognize any skills that he's already discovered?
Prepared.
Safety. And he gets there early and he's prepared, right? There are 3 things. Are those 3 things valuable? You know what companies struggle with? Getting people to show up and show up on time. Believe it or not, those are 2 of the main problems that companies have. If they can get those 2 covered, everything else just kind of goes along, right? He's already covered what most companies are really concerned about. And if he has a resume that says, I've got an MET degree from Purdue, he's pretty much a shoo-in for an interview. Okay? Not completely, but you get the idea. Okay? All right. Once I had made it to my desk, I unpacked my backpack and set up my company-supplied laptop. The first thing every day was to check my email to ensure there were no late emails that I had missed before leaving the day before. There were 2 main objectives that I was tasked with for this internship: creating and implementing a facility-wide lube oil analysis program and assisting with the implementation and expansion of the Fluke X-43 CMMS. Now, excuse me, CMMS stands for Coordinate Measuring Machine System, I think. I don't know. It sounds technical, it sounds good, it's probably good context for a skill. Now, it sounds like it's some type of measurement device that's high precision, probably also high dollar. So what skill is suggested by the fact that this intern is dealing with a high dollar piece of equipment? He might be careful. He might be responsible. He's not going to break it, right? He's going to actually make it work and produce value for the company. So there's a skill worth talking about. We have to decide. Now, one of the difficulties from my perspective is I don't have this experience. It's the student that has the experience. So I have to kind of feel them out and say, well, does this suggest that you were responsible? And the student says, well, this was only a $1,000 piece of equipment that was broken anyway. Well, probably not over a lot of responsibility. But if the student says this thing cost $500,000 and was supposed to revolutionize the company's measurement system so that we save a tremendous amount of money over here, yeah, now we're talking, right? Now it's something very interesting. Anyway, and it suggests that the student has particular skills. There's got to be a good way to work Neeson's line into this. A very particular set of skills. Anyway, nobody seen Taken? Oh well. All right. So he had 2 main objectives, 2 main things that he was tasked with. Creating and implementing a facility-wide lube oil analysis program. How important is lubrication oil? It's pretty important, isn't it? If you don't have lubrication oil, the machines don't last as long. And the expensive machines die and have to be replaced or fixed, which costs quite a bit. Not only in the cost for fixing the machines, but also in the downtime for production. So is this program that he's working on important? Yeah, it's important. So it suggests some level of responsibility again. What else could it suggest, more on a technical note? Does every machine need the same lubrication? No. So it suggests that the student either has or learned, in this context, something about the varieties of lubrications, where they're used, how to select the right one, which is an important skill to have, isn't it? So that's another skill that could be written about in his resume. The lube oil analysis program required the identification of each machine in the facility that used any type of lubricating oil and which type or types that each machine used. So again, we've got some suggestion that there's different types of oil and he had to learn something about it. We could go through the rest of this. I don't want to right now, but you see that the story, and we've only gotten through the first paragraph. We're not even halfway through that page. This story is already yielding fruit of skills, right? I liken it to a gold mine. If you want to find gold, what do? Well, you buy a bunch of dirt first that hopefully has some gold in it. You go digging, you find the gold, and then you make that gold into more valuable objects, right? Well, before you can find the gold nuggets, you have to buy the mine. That's what we're doing when we write our story, okay? When you write your story in the context of one particular job, you are purchasing the mine. You're going to spend 4 hours of your time to purchase a mine that I guarantee you will have gold in it. When you find those gold nuggets, we're going to take them out, we're going to polish them off. In other words, we're going to wordsmith and write them out where they accurately describe what you have that's valuable that you're ready to sell, because now you're ready to sell those golden nuggets. Does that make sense? So I can't overemphasize the importance of the story. What you'll do is you go through, you write down the average day, and then I suggest you go back to the story again and add in outlier events as if they happen every single day. Not that you're going to claim in the interview that they do, but you're just trying to capture your experience so that you can then present it, because you're trying to recognize, you're just trying to get at your skills. right? Recognize those skills, write about them, put them in the resume, because even if you only use that skill once, it's still a skill you possess that you could use over and over. Let me give you an example. I had a student that worked for an oil change place, of all segues. That's what he did. He worked for a Jiffy Lube or something like that. Now this student had been there a couple of years. He was well known. He wasn't the manager, but he was well known at the lube place. He was a good employee. And so he had some level of trust with the manager there. There was a little old lady that had, for whatever reason, decided that this Jiffy Lube place was reputable, responsible, and they weren't going to try to rip her off. So it didn't matter if she needed tires or, well, not tires, they didn't do tires, but she needed oil, windshield washer fluid, new windshield wipers, whatever it was, she took her car to them first to get their opinion because she trusted them. One day they got a call on the phone. This little lady had broken down on 65 South going towards Louisville. And all that had happened is she'd had a flat. She had a spare, but she didn't have the physical strength to jack up the car, change out the tire, and didn't feel comfortable doing that anyway on this highway. So who did she call? The Jiffy Lube. Well, Jiffy Lube is not in the business of going and changing tires for people on the road. But this student, they were slow anyway, this student had enough standing in the company, I guess you could call it, that he made the decision, I'm going to go change this lady's tire. And he did, and what happened? Well, he won a customer for life. Does that context really suggest a skill that the student had? Not necessarily, but it is certainly an outlier event because he didn't go around the city changing tires all day long, right? But it's something that he added into his story that was an outlier event. Again, I don't remember if we ended up finding a skill there or not. Maybe he was trusted. Maybe that may have been, right? Because the company trusted him enough that he wasn't going to go out to the highway and change the tire and, oh, by the way, I'm going to go shopping for a couple of hours. He didn't do that, right? He was trusted by the company to go and do this. So that context, although it's not something he did every day, does suggest that he was trusted by the company, you see. So adding in all these outlier events to your story is actually really important, okay? So what I need from you is a commitment that by 1 week from today, you will have written a story for one job. If you can't give me that commitment, it's okay. Come back anyway, because Professor McCart will have a lot to say that is kind of different from what I have to say. There's not a lot he and I say that butt heads and are different. He just has a different approach and something that will help you for interviews as well, okay? But if you do not have the chance to write a story, I will give you a copy of this story that and I purposely didn't read it all because I want you to recognize some of the other skills. But our goal next time will be to take stories, and maybe some you can work with the person next to you, but take a story and try to recognize the skills and then try to write out that skill, you see? And I'll help you. We'll do this at a response basis. So you'll say, well, I think there's a skill here, here's what it says, and we'll talk about what that skill actually is, and then we'll write it out until it sounds good. Now, wordsmithing is not to claim that you have something you don't. The purpose, or to make something sound bigger or better than it really is. The purpose of writing out these skills and tweaking the words, which I call wordsmithing, the purpose of that is just to accurately describe what it is that you're offering. Does that make sense? And that's where students struggle because they feel like they end up stretching what they've done to show they have engineering skills, and they don't realize that communication is just as important, right? They don't realize that being able to deal with a difficult boss or a difficult coworker is just as important because your goal is to get the job done for the company, not to get your feelings hurt over what Joe said yesterday, right? So, any questions?
Oh yeah, for education?
Yes.
Would we put pre-university or like pre-university technical on?
Whatever you think accurately describes it. One thing I would suggest, and of course this is when we were still statewide technology, a lot of students are starting to put Purdue Polytechnic at New Albany, but I certainly want to see New Albany in it. You know why? Because this is your chance to be honest, right? You're not claiming you got a degree from Purdue West Lafayette. By the way, it doesn't matter anyway. Our students are actually very well respected. And the other thing is that a lot of our students end up staying local. So this fact that you went to school here and your address is local suggests that you're going to stay around. They're not going to hire you and a year later you're moving off to Washington State because you don't like the area anymore. You probably have family. That's probably why you're here in the first place, going to school locally, because you have family or other ties here, you see. Anything else? This is a good question. If you want to go somewhere else, it's certainly okay to. I've had students, one student, I think I told you guys, came to me and he wanted to work for Boeing. I still remember him. I'm friends with him on Facebook now, and I get to see all the things he's doing. It's pretty cool. He came from Kentucky. He worked at a small airport in Kentucky, and you'd think airports would be high-tech areas. He said that there were times after a plane took off, he'd have to take a shovel out to the runway to scoop parts up off the runway for the next takeoff. Now, I don't think I would want to fly in one of those planes that has parts falling off as it takes off. And maybe he was exaggerating just a little bit, but certainly I could see rusting things and debris being left behind that he had to clean up. So a really small airport, but he worked at this airport because he loved airplanes. And he wanted to work for the big guys, right? He wanted to work for Boeing or a company like that. And so he and I sat down, we wrote his resume, wrote about his experience in his airport in Kentucky, wrote about the other jobs he had had, and he managed to apply to Boeing. You know what happened the first time? They rejected him, they weren't interested. But he applied again. He applied 2 or 3 different places. You see, most companies are large enough, you can apply several times to different areas, and different people will see your resumes. It's not like they all get together and, oh, this is John, we threw him in the wastebasket yesterday, let's throw all his resumes, we're not going to get him, right? It doesn't work that way. There are multiple people inside the company, and what looks good to one person may not to another, okay? So anyway, he kept applying. He got an internship at Boeing one summer. He came back, worked on his coursework here, got another internship at Boeing the next summer, and after that, guess who wanted to hire him immediately? Boeing. So now he works out in Washington State, or I think he's still there. But that's where he moved, was to the West Coast. And he was so excited. It was cool because he came back. Of course, being involved with airplanes, you get to fly. You know how to get flights to wherever you want to go. So he came back and took us all out to lunch one day. And it was neat because he'd been out for about a year or so. And he said, I've already given a presentation to the French and to the Japanese, and I'm going to Germany tomorrow. He was excited, just living the dream that he wanted to live. And the name Purdue will do that for you. That's really your ticket to wherever you want to go. So don't be hesitant to put Purdue New Albany or Purdue Polytechnic, however you want to word it. It's okay. Make sure that you put your degree first, because again, I'm trying to put the focus on you. This is what you've done, BS and MET. This is where you did it. Okay, so you'll notice that I've got it in italics so that it's set off a little bit from the rest of it. Anything else? It doesn't matter, by the way, what job you write your story about. If all you've done is work for Jimmy John's, that's okay. Write a story about going into Jimmy John's and everything you've done, then add in all the outlier events, and I guarantee you we will find skills. Because there's plenty of customer service, plenty of communication, and you may think as an engineer, I'm not going to do that, I'm going to be behind a computer doing calculations all day. That's not true. You will be talking to a lot of people. As a design engineer, one of the things I did is talk to the people down on the shop floor that were going to make the things that I designed. I talked to people in purchasing who had to buy the raw material for my designs to be made from. I talked to the people in marketing, right? Because they're the people that knew what the customer wanted. I talked to the people in curriculum development because they were the ones that were going to write manuals that went with the equipment that I designed. So I had to interface with all those people as well as everyone in my own department and the president of the company and sales and so on. You had a question, yes?
How far back in your job history should you go?
That's a great question. How far back should you go? If I were looking for a job right now, I would not include the lawn care work I did in high school. I would not include the computer lab experience I had as a student at Purdue, because one of the ways I paid my way through college is by opening up computer labs in the morning at 7 a.m., okay? I wouldn't include those things. The reason is because I have much more valuable experience since then that would help me land the next engineering job, you see? So here's the thing, here's the cardinal rule. It belongs on your resume if it helps you get the interview. It does not belong on the resume if it does not help you get the interview, okay? If you've got something on your resume that is not helping you get the interview, it's taking the place of something that will, okay? So how far back you should go simply depends on what experience you have. Now, if I had no communications experience whatsoever in my engineering experience, I would include that lab assistant job. You know why? Because I had to communicate with the customers, right? One of my jobs there was to help students with computer problems, but not with homework. But yet, I help some students with homework anyway, okay? So I could talk about that, and I could talk about different skills that I had. I've had plenty of communication experience and teaching since then, so I wouldn't bother including those. Your focus should not be so much on how long ago you did something or the caliber of the job. Your focus should be on what skills can I display in this work experience. Think of it as a display case. Each of your work experiences are display cases where you're displaying the golden nuggets that you can prove you have from that experience. Okay, that's what gets included. Okay, what else? Good questions. I really like the format I have for the resume. When you're done with this workshop, you'll actually still have to write your resume, but hopefully you'll have skills that you can put in. And I suggest you just drop them into this format, eliminate all the points that are there, so you don't accidentally claim to have something you don't have. Okay, and then you should have a good resume that will help you get internships pretty easily. How many of you are trying to write a resume for the career fair? A couple of you? Okay. All right, that's good. You'll have to work on it. Do set aside some time to work on this, and make sure you've shut off the TV, you've shut off your phone, you're not on Facebook, don't get distracted. Okay, but write out the story and just, beginning of the day to the end, don't get caught in the bullet point trap. Make sure it's as many words as possible, because those words will give you richer context and they'll help suggest better what your skills are and what the context is that support those skills. Anything else? All right, well, I guess I'll see you guys in 1 week. Please have your story written. If you don't panic, come back anyway. You can either use this story or you can use, maybe someone will let you work with them on their story, okay? Thank you guys for your attention.